All right. So you're out of the divorce. You've moved ahead. Um, when did adoption or or the um, oh, I'm trying to think of the word. It's so difficult. The uh, foster care. There it is. That's so
Yeah.
difficult to remember. When did foster care, adoption, when did that even enter the picture for you?
Yeah. So, uh, after I divorced, so I was somewhere around the age of 30, I guess, when I divorced and like I'm supposed to be living like this carefree single life. Well, basically after all I had been through, that just did not fit. And I tried. I did. It did not fit. And so I began praying and asking God to just give me a mission, something that I could devote my life to. Kids were not what I had in mind. I don't know what I had in mind. I mean, I knew that God would find the right place for me. Um, but
That's a loaded request of God right there.
I know, I know. Um, you got to be careful what you pray for, but
Or
but
maybe you
no,
don't. Maybe you
I
don't.
know, no regrets, right? Because
Yeah.
God does have something good for you, um, and so I did. I began just that was my prayer. Just give me a mission, give me something to invest my life in, because I cannot just come home from work and I don't know, knit every night. Whatever it was that I was doing, I don't remember what I did with my time, but I did something. And
You watch some of those quirky television shows.
that's right. That was it.
I don't know. I just took a stab at that one.
But um but I'm not a dabbler. I don't, I'm not good at just, I'll do a little here and a little there and it'll all, I'll feel a sense of accomplishment after having done that. That is not how it works. I really need to dive in to whatever it is that I'm doing. And so that, that was definitely the heart of my prayer. I need something that I'm really getting into. And so uh yeah, at some point he answered that prayer. And when at first when I started kind of hearing from him about foster care, and I did not know anybody who was fostering at all. I was like, where is this coming from? So it wasn't like, and there was
And how
no,
long ago was that? Would that be 10, 12
um,
years ago or not that long?
let's see, about 10 or 11 years
Okay.
ago, I guess.
So that would have been 3, 4 years after the divorce was finalized, something like that.
It's something like that. Yes.
So yeah, because
Yeah.
I want, it helps me because sometimes like when we read the Bible, we think that Elijah's life was full of every day waking up and God spoke to him,
Right.
and that, King David every day was this battle that he's winning or, whatever. But it wasn't. There were these big pockets of time that happen in between that's just life in the solitude, life that's out there in the fringes. So
Right.
3, 4 years after you get this thought.
Yeah. This, what I definitely would say a calling from God. And at
How
first
did you
I
know that?
okay. So, this is how I like to describe, because people definitely, it, when somebody asks, like, how do you know you heard from God? Like, God speaks through the scriptures. He absolutely does. That's our primary way of hearing from him, right? But he's not going to speak about your specific calling through the scripture. The
At
best
least
way,
not most of the time.
right? The the way that I describe it, and I've never heard anybody else describe it exactly this way, but this is my own personal experience, right? Is that um, you know, I'll be praying, or I'll be in a quiet time with God, or sometimes asleep. God likes to wake me up in the middle of the night. But, and I will just have this fully formed idea that is in my head all of a sudden, very, very suddenly. And it doesn't even make sense to me. And because I didn't build it myself, I don't have the building blocks of this idea or this plan or this revelation. And so I'll go, whoa. And then I'll just take a breather and just start breaking it down. What? What does that mean? What are we talking about here?
So do you if you're awakened in the middle of the night, do you write this down? You put it in a journal or on a piece of paper next to the door to the bed?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm not a big writer.
Okay.
But I'm maybe I used to do that in the past. I don't really remember. But for me, like it's a matter of wrapping my head around the concepts. It's when I understand the concepts, then I can really start applying it. But to me, it was it was this fully formed idea, plan of it wasn't a vision. I didn't like see myself doing this or anything like that. It was just the idea in my head that like I needed to become a foster mom.
So was that a nighttime revelation, or was it just kind of, do you remember?
I don't think that one was a nighttime revelation. No.
Okay. Because I know there are people out there that they will have dreams. Some people have these vivid dreams. Some people have visions. I haven't been one of those that's had visions. I've had a couple of dreams in my life that I'd say that seems like it was from God.
Right.
But yeah, for me, I mean, this kind of relates to me better as far as like you're getting these thoughts. It's like, where in the world did that come from?
Right.
And it's not like, it's not something that is in violation of who God is. It's not like, I want you to go kill this person, or
right.
or I want you to go and they've got a lot of money over there. You don't have much. Why don't you go steal some? You can be Robin Hood. No, that's not.
Right.
So yeah, keep going on this hearing from God.
Being a foster parent, I think is definitely something that Jesus would have recommended.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Absolutely.
But so anyway, this idea did it came to my head, and I kept that to myself because I was like, I think everybody who I would share that with would think that I was a little bit crazy. It wasn't as if there was a natural progression. I was not like, super involved in children's ministry. I didn't babysit a lot. There was no, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, I gotta say.
So,
right?
So this is what comes to my mind. I'm thinking of Mary, 16 years old. Angel comes to her and says, "Yeah, you know what? You're fixing to be pregnant, and you're gonna have a baby. What? How does that even work?" And then not only that, he's gonna save the world from their sins. Right. So it's almost like that. I mean, you didn't necessarily have an angel, but it is that kind of like, what? Where did this come from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in the beginning, I was like, I'm going to keep praying about that and through it. And then eventually I did share it with, a few people, and I asked them to just pray with me through this. Am I really hearing from God? Can they hear anything on my behalf? Like, just help me out a little bit, people. And there was definitely there were people who were like, are you, and they definitely, and there were some people who, it was more than just, we don't think you're capable. There were people who were saying, but you've lost a child. And fostering usually means you have them for a while and they're reunified with their parents or they go elsewhere. It's, it's a temporary situation.
Right.
And are you sure that you want to basically torture yourself by going through this repeatedly, especially as a single person? And
valid question.
I immediately thought, like, my response to that was, I think in that way, I am absolutely a good candidate for it because I've been through it. I know what it's like. And it's not the same thing for a child to die versus, going to, live with somebody else. But doing hard things prepares us to do more hard things. And I'm like,
Can I quote you on that?
Yeah, yes, you can.
That's excellent, though.
But, I had her for a very brief period of time. Yeah. And I lived to tell the tale. So I knew that I could do it again. And I think there were so many people who just out of concern for me said, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But thank goodness, God knows better. And it was frankly, I think one of his ways of just preparing me for it. So anyway, at some point, I started kind of taking some small steps towards, okay, if you're calling me to do this, I will be faithful and try to figure this out.
What were the small steps? You had other people praying. That's definitely one of the steps. You shared it, and then you had other people praying.
Right.
What were some of the small steps that you took?
I started reaching out to an agency, a private agency that is responsible for recruiting and kind of overseeing the foster parent side of things. So it's not the government agency that would handle the cases of the children.
Okay.
But and what this agency was doing was recruiting through churches. And so I began a conversation with them about, and just kind of, I attended some recruiting events, started going to a few trainings and just listening to, okay, what does this mean? How do I think this might fit in my life? And initially I thought, well, I get along pretty well with teenagers, and I'm sure that teenagers are like, one of the harder groups of age groups to place. And so I'm thinking that will be my little niche or whatever as a foster parent. And once again, this revelation moment, I was in one of their training events. And then they were talking about the great need that they have for infants, and that, it's really hard. Most people don't have time to take off from work, to really care for an infant the way that they should be cared for. And I absolutely just felt the move of the Holy Spirit for me to start with fostering infants. And perhaps that was just because even a natural parent starts with a baby. They're a little bit easier to handle. so I think there's wisdom in that as well. I think now when I think back of it and thinking of teenagers, I'm like, I would not have been able to handle that. But anyway, so eventually I finished all of the paperwork and all of the things that I had to do in order to make that happen, and there we were.
Okay, so a couple things that you you felt like you heard from God. And I think it's interesting that instead of just going out and saying, okay, let's go foster care, you know, boom, teenagers, that just what, you know, you you tested the waters, as it were, because you know it's so subjective a lot of times when as God talks to us, it's just subjective, and we can interpret it to be, oh yeah, I'm supposed to foster care teenagers, and we have our like our biases, and you know we take what we've known and we apply it, and we think that we've got the understanding of what that initial unction or whatever you want to call it is. And yet you did an incredibly wise thing by saying, okay, let's just take steps towards that and let's see if God's really in this. Now it's another thing that when God parts the Red Sea and says go now,
Right.
it's, you know, then it's like, okay, instead of just saying, we'll just wait here, you got the pillar of fire and stuff like that. No, I'm going to take that away and you need to go. That's not this situation. This is God saying, and then he's so patient with us that he will give us confirmations and clarifications along the way. And here you are then, you know, months later, maybe even a year or two later, and you're saying, I'm supposed to foster care infants. And you mentioned something else too. You talked about you felt like the Spirit moved on you and said this. What was that like for you? What recall, if you can, in words, what that was like?
Well, I do remember, you know, like I said, it was this like training event, and I remember there being lots of tears. I was I was weeping in the middle
Wow.
of this thing because I was just and I can't really explain why, other than it was just an overwhelming emotion of this is what he's telling me, and I feel it so deeply. And it wasn't just that, I mean, because they were presenting facts in this
Yeah.
class. It wasn't
And it wasn't like
as if-
it was like a church service or something like that. So, you know,
right.
and
They
God
weren't
came
showing
down.
they weren't like showing all the pictures of the babies that were
Yeah.
waiting for somebody to help them. It wasn't like that at all. It was a very just, you know, facts driven training session. And so there was no reason for me to become so overwhelmed like that, except that it was just the Spirit, you know, just helping me to feel the passion that I think comes with his moving, right?
You know, this is one thing I can say. When you make decisions like that, like when you're making that decision to go into marriage, when you're making that decision even to leave the marriage, when you're making that decision to adopt or to foster care, you need to hear from God.
Yeah.
You need to hear from God, and you need to know it was God. I can't tell you how much I prayed before I proposed to Darby. Because I did. I prayed and I fasted. I knew that I was such a screw up anyway that, you know what, she's probably going to say no if I ever ask her anyway. But just the fact that I was such a screw up, I knew that I had to know this was God and it wasn't me. And because you know what's taken place since then, you had to know, there were times that you had to know, no, God's called me to this. There is his grace for this.
Right.
And he knew in that moment that that was going to be one of those moments that you could look back on and say, no, that was God. I can't refute that. That was God.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So take us in the next, and kind of moving ahead, take us down that road.
Yeah. So, you know, every foster parent has a completely different experience and situation, you know. But you know, I had a couple of placements before I had Maddie. Before she.
So
came
you had
to
a couple of infants that came and went.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
For varying, you know, amounts of time, but for everyone, I learned a great deal. And there were so many things that changed me as a person, because I learned so much about human connection that there's especially when you're dealing with infants, when you can't have a conversation with them, everything is on just this very basic level. But it just it just takes you a little bit of time to understand. And it was fantastic. They were very hard situations, but I'm thankful for them, and so thankful for what they taught me as a person, and thankful to know that I helped those people for the rest of their lives, the families that they're with, who I still get communication from sometimes, which is fantastic. Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Those were people in need, and that I was able to be there for them in that time, and it was outstanding. So when Maddie's situation, so she I was called to pick her up from the hospital. She was only 5 days old.
Oh, wow.
I went and picked her up from the hospital. She had never even been in anyone else's home. So she came to live with me then, and we started our journey that ultimately, wouldn't lead to adoption until she was 2 years old.
Okay.
But
is that common for somebody that goes from foster to adoption? Is it common that it can take that length of time?
Every single situation is unique.
Okay. All right. It's good to know.
It's really hard. It's really hard to say. I mean, the court system itself, if it's a matter of them having to sever the parental rights really without the parents' consent, that takes time. They go through a legal process in order to make sure that they have offered every opportunity to those parents to step up, that they've offered opportunity to biological family members, and they've tried their hardest to find who those people are, and make sure that they've offered every opportunity for that child to have some sort of connection to their biological family, and all of those things take time. So yeah, we went through all of that process, and
so when did it start to dawn on you that you were, what, I think I'd like to maybe adopt this little girl?
Yeah, when I first started fostering, and you're filling out papers, and one of the most basic questions is, do you want to try to adopt? If you're fostering and the opportunity makes itself available for adoption, are you open to that?
Okay.
Right? Now, and that's not a binding thing. If you've been fostering a child, and let's say that it's just for whatever reason, that specific child is not the best match for you permanently, and I don't know what that reason may be, but whatever it is, then yeah, it's not like you have to adopt them just because you check that on your paperwork. But
okay.
But I did, when they asked me the question, I said, yeah, I think if I'm committed to having a child in my house all the time to foster, I don't see any reason why I would not be willing to adopt them and just have them part of my life permanently.
Logical thought.
Do what?
Logical thought.
It is logical. But I think with the opportunities that I had before Maddie came along, Absolutely. Like I would have jumped in there and adopted those guys as well if, if there was not a situation that they could go to, a healthy situation for them to go to. Um, so there's not a child that came into my home that I would not have
Okay.
adopted if
Okay.
I needed to,
All right.
right? Um, but but yeah, um, Maddie is I oftentimes just sit back and kind of laugh at the match that God made with us, to make this one permanent. She is a lot like me in a lot of ways, and it's funny when you think about those ways, and then the complete opposite of me in other funny ways. And I'll give you an example of that. We just decorated our house for Christmas last weekend, I think it was. And, I guess most of that responsibility, putting up a tree, an 8-year-old can't put up a tree. So most of these kind of responsibilities fall to me, right? But she's also at the age of 8, like there's a lot that she really wants to be involved with. So I put up the tree, and I actually had some gifts. This was the first time ever that I had some gifts that were already wrapped.
Look at you.
I know. But that's only because I don't have enough space to hide them. So I needed to go ahead and wrap them. So, as soon as we finished decorating, I brought those gifts out and I put them under the tree. And she says, "Can I just rearrange them?" And I said, "Sure." And so she goes over, and I'm thinking, oh, she's just gonna like shake them and all of this stuff. No, she just stacked them appropriately and made them into this very pretty little like presentation under the tree. And that's so not me. I'm a very practical person, very, they're under the tree and that's all we need to worry about. But I just want to make it pretty is her thing.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. So, anyway,
So how did it become clear that that Maddie, you were supposed to adopt Maddie?
And I don't, there wasn't like a moment.
So there wasn't a dream or anything like that?
No, there wasn't anything. I think to me, it was just a matter of, she's been in my house. I'm the only parent that she has ever known.
Mm-hmm.
I see absolutely no reason to disrupt her life by, moving her on, and I love her. It's not just that I would do that if I had the opportunity to give her to somebody else, but it was like I have been with her for every milestone and every. I'm so proud of her, and I'm so invested in everything that she is.
You're her mom.
Very much the same as a biological parent would be.
Yeah, you're her mom.
And it was just a natural progression. There was never a question. There was never oh, hold up. It was, if I'm given the opportunity, if God opens these doors for me to adopt, I will run through them.
So in this instance, I'm just thinking with her though, did she have the opportunity to go to some, a biological parent or whatever, but it just wasn't a good situation? Or
without going into a lot of details about
Yeah.
her family history.
Yeah, I
and
don't want
kind
that.
of the reasons for her placement. There just was not there were a limited number of people in her biological family to begin with.
Okay.
And it was a mix between either they're not a good parental candidate,
Yeah.
or they weren't interested.
Okay. Totally makes sense. So that So yeah, so then I can see where there's kind of this progression for you saying, well, maybe this is the one. You have been open to that. And if you know Maddie, Maddie is just, she is a joy to be around. She's
She
a hoot
is.
too. She's a hoot. And she is, how can I say this? Full of energy.
She is. She is.
She loves life. So I love that that blessing came in that way. And I think, kind of maybe bringing this to a close, or however, yeah, that was kind of awkward, wasn't it? It's kind of winding this down a little bit.